In this video, we're going to be doing an introduction to quadratic equations. So let's get started. So quadratic equations are a different type of equations. Usually, if you haven't learned quadratics, you're used to linear equations, which are equations like y, 2, or something like that, something along those lines. So when we hear quadratic equations, it's something new. So quadratic equations are usually going to be of the form, this is the form they're going to be in. Now this form of quadratic equations, there's three main components of the quadratic. Right here we have the quadratic term. That's going to be the first term in quadratics. A can have a coefficient of 1, or it can be greater than 1. Okay, so A is not going to be 0. So A can be 1 or greater than 1. And there's different types of methods for solving quadratic, so we're just going to focus on the parts of quadratic. Now this term right here, bx, bx is the linear term. And c, the last term remaining, is the constant term. And of course it's equal to 0. Those are the parts of quadratic. And it's important that we understand the parts of a quadratic, since depending on the type of the quadratic, it's going to be different. So I'm going to give an example. A quadratic can be in the form ax squared plus bx plus c, assuming a is greater than 1. Assuming that a is greater than 1, the quadratic is going to be like this. So assuming a 1, the quadratic is going to be like this. And then we also have a quadratic of the form x squared plus bx plus c. And this quadratic, it's the same thing, but in this one, a is just 1. So in this one, in this one, a is equal to 1. That's how we usually see the forms of quadratics. So x squared plus bx plus c is equal to the constant a is equal to 1, and this one, a is greater than 1. So there's different ways to solve different forms of quadratics. Now, usually in the beginning, in this video, I'm just going to talk about factoring. And factoring really depends if we're seeing a quadratic in this form, or if we're seeing a quadratic in this form with the coefficient of the quadratic term is greater than 1. Here, the coefficient of the quadratic term in this one, it's 1. The coefficient of the quadratic term is just 1. In this one, the coefficient of the quadratic term is greater than 1. So we have different ways to factor different forms of quadratics. So now that we've learned the different types of quadratics and the parts of quadratic, and how to refer by these terms, and you're going to be referring by these terms, like if someone asks you the constant term, etc., you're going to need to know these terms, especially if you have like an exam or something. So yeah, now we're going to focus on factoring quadratics. So I'm going to start off with quadratics in the form x squared plus bx plus c. And we're going to give an example would be, let's say if we have x squared x squared minus 2x minus 15 equals 0. Now, first thing we notice, we have our quadratic term. The quadratic term has a coefficient of 1, as we have seen. Coefficient is 1, linear term, normal, constant term, normal. So when we factor our quadratics, what we want to do is we want to take the linear term. Negative 15 is our linear term. This is our linear term, right? We want to take it over here and find two factors of negative 15 that when added, they add up to 2. All right, negative 2 coefficient, so they must add up. All right. So right here, 15, the first thing that comes to my mind when I see negative 15 is negative 5 and 3. And we see this is equal to negative 15, and negative 5 plus 3 is negative 2. So it obviously works. So now that we have negative 5 and 3, we can start to factor. Now, we've learned factoring in previous videos. So we know we're going to have an x here, multiply that, binomials, and we have a minus 5, and we have a plus 3. The minus 5, we're going to stick it into the first one. Plus 3 goes into here. That's basically a majority of the work is done. Now that we've factored, it's easier to solve the problem. And we know that this is just 0. This is nothing but the factored version of this quadratic. So now that we know what this is, we're going to go ahead and we know that x minus 5 was 0. This is how you want to solve this. And let's say 0, x equals 5. So you have x equals 5. 5, and that's just one solution. Remember, quadratic equations have more than one solution. Most of the time, we're going to have more than one solution. Sometimes we have one solution. And x plus 3 is equal to 0. X is obviously negative 3. 5 and negative 3. And those are our solutions. That's how you would factor and solve a quadratic of that form. Now, many people ask, what if you can't factor the quadratic? That's going to be for the next video I'm going to post. So that's going to be on utilizing the quadratic formula. For now, it's just right here. Okay. So the next quadratic we have, we're going to use an example. An example might be, let's say we have, so in this example is going to be a quadratic of the form ax squared plus bx. That's what we're going to be focusing on right now. So let's say we have a quadratic. Let's say we have 2x squared minus 3x minus 35 is equal to 0. And if we have this quadratic, well, first what we're going to do is, and when we have quadratics of this form, we have a different way of dealing with these quadratics. Alright, so we already know we're going to have a 2x and an x. We have We're gonna have to do a little bit of trial and error here, but eventually we are going to go to the answer. So first what we want to do is we need to find, like, first we know that we're gonna have a 2x here and x here. This, when multiply, is gonna give us 2x squared. And then we want two numbers. Again, the first part's done. Two numbers that are factors of the constant term that add to the linear term. So 35, 7 and 5, 5 and 7. We're going to try 5 and 7. So, all right, 5 and 7. So 5 and negative 7, we're going to try. Negative 35, we already know. Negative 5 minus 7 is not negative 3. So, yeah. All right. So that of course is not going to work. See, what we're going to do when we have this form is we're not going to do this. That's not going to work out. We want to start from fresh, and when we have a quadratic of this form, we also have a special way to factor this quadratic. It's not a set factorization, but we have a factorization that or a way to factor a quadratic of the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. We have a special way of dealing with these quadratics. So here, the first thing I'm going to do is we're gonna do the quadratic here. So 2x squared minus 3x minus 35 equals 0. All right, we have the quadratic. We know we're gonna have 2x and x. But when it comes to 35, we have multiple ways of expressing 35. And we're just gonna have to keep trying. And so first I'm gonna plug in, we're gonna have a positive and a negative. I know we're gonna have a positive and a negative because when we're pulling in the linear terms, we're gonna have that. So we're gonna try positive 5 and negative 7. So multiply 2x, 9, 7, negative 14 plus 5. That's not gonna work out. So we know that's not gonna work out. So the only way that's going to work out is we're gonna try the opposite. Whenever it doesn't work out, we try the opposite. So we know we're gonna have a 2x x. We might want to switch up the signs here. So I'm gonna try positive and negative. I'm gonna switch up the numbers. We're gonna do plus 5 and minus 5. Yeah. So yeah. 2x times negative 5, multiply them, negative 10 plus 7 is negative 3x, 7x, negative 10x plus 7x, negative 3x. They multiply to negative 35, so we know our factorization is correct. And now, same thing, and we know how to handle this. 2x plus 7 equals 0. 2x equals negative 7, x equals negative 7 over 2. That's one solution. We'd have x minus 5 is equal to 0. Obviously, x is just 5. So our solutions are x equals 5 and x equals negative 7 over 2. And that is how we solve quadratic in this form. Now, here's what we actually do when we have a quadratic of the form ax squared plus bx plus c. When we have a quadratic in such a form, I'm going to use the same example. We're not going to solve it again, but we're going to factor it again. And whenever we factor a quadratic that's in this form, we first start at the quadratic term. Two numbers are multiplied to 2x squared. First thing, I think of 2x, and then we need another x. 2x multiplied by x is 2x squared. Give me another pair. 2x. We already know these two quadratic terms, they multiply 2x squared. Moving on. Now here comes the part which requires the most attention. We need to find the constant term, negative 35. We find factors. And when we're checking these factors, in this case we had 7, 5. When we're checking these factors and we're plugging them in, plus 7 minus 5. The first thing we want to do when we're checking our factorization is we want to multiply 2x, this, that's negative 10x. So we want to multiply this term by this. We already know it's negative 10x. And we want to multiply these two, 10x plus 7x. We already know that's negative 3x, satisfies both terms. So we already know factorization is correct, and we can go ahead and solve this. So whenever we have a quadratic of this form, that is how we deal with it. And yeah. Hopefully this video helped if you were having trouble or you just want to know how to solve quadratic equations by factoring. Next video is going to be focusing on using the quadratic formula. Hopefully this helped. And yeah.